Hello everyone, David Adler, President of the Australian Jewish Association, and I have with me a very special guest today, the lead Senate candidate for the Australian Conservatives in the state of New South Wales is Sophie York. Sophie, welcome to the AJA YouTube and Facebook page.
Thanks, David. It's lovely to be here.
Now, some people may not know much about you, so can you just give a very quick, little few points about who is Sophie York?
Sure. Okay, well, I'm the lead Senate candidate for the Australian Conservatives. This was a party that was started by Sen Cory Bernardi in 2017. He was originally in the Liberal Party, but he found that this party was actually moving away from its founding principles. So his view was we need to keep faith with those conservative principles, and he started this party, and it is now growing very fast. We've got thousands of members across Australia, and we're running candidates for the Senate in the upcoming federal election. So we're not running lower house representatives, but just Senate candidates. But the things that we support include marriage and family and minimal government and civil society and freedom. That's one of our major platforms, is freedom of speech and freedom of religion. We also our party wants to connect with everyday Australians. So what matters to them matters to us. And if they're concerned about immigration, and they're concerned about water, and they're concerned about how their children are being educated, then we are concerned about that as well. We want to be their voice in the parliament. And we have noticed that the major parties tend to not even deal with these issues. They just overlook them. So our view is we need to have a team in the Senate who will actually, the major parties will need to negotiate with us, and we will have proper, commonsensical laws in Australia.
Now, I've had the opportunity to meet Sophie a few times and get to know her a bit. As you can see, she's an intelligent and articulate woman. By training, you're what?
So my background is I'm at the bar, the New South Wales Bar, and I'm also a member of the Navy Legal Reserve. And I have been a board member on Campion College for a number of years. I also was involved in the reform movement in the Liberal Party, but obviously I've left that party now. So my background is law, but also the Australian Defence Force. David, the views I express are not those of the ADF. These are my personal views. I'm running as a political candidate. Just want to make that very clear. Thanks.
Okay, I should make it also clear that although we see a lot of commonality in policies between AJA and Australian Conservatives, we don't endorse any political party, but we're happy to talk to people who have policies that resonate. Now, obviously we have a couple of special interests in representing the Jewish community, and one of those is the connection with Israel. Have you been to Israel?
Yes, I went in January this year and had a very wonderful time there, about 10 days there, and was treated very well wherever I went. And I met a number of community leaders and political leaders, and went to all different areas. So it was partly historical, partly political, but most of all it gave me a feel for a very complicated but beautiful nation.
Senator Cory Bernardi has generally been very supportive of issues that have affected Israel. So I just want to ask you very quickly about a couple of them and see where you stand. Last year, the subject of the recognition of Jerusalem and the location of the Australian embassy arose. What's your view?
Well, my view is that when you look at any topic, you should actually say, well, what are your guiding principles? Rather than just take the item at hand, you should say, well, what is the guiding principle about where embassies are in the world? Where do embassies normally go? Do they go in that nation's capital? What's the nation's capital? So it almost answers itself. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if it is the case that Jerusalem is truly the capital of Israel, then it makes sense for the embassy to be there. So to my mind, it's actually a no-brainer. It shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't arise. I'm sure that, Tel Aviv has that wonderful coastline, and I'm sure the staff would love to be there, but to my mind, you always return to the guiding principles for anything in life.
Well, how would you apply that to another issue that's been bubbling along that affects Israel, which is foreign aid, and I'm talking particularly about aid which might be diverted to incite or reward terrorism, whether it's given to UNRWA or the Palestinian Authority or wherever. Currently we give $43 million of aid to what's called the Palestinian territories.
So the average Australian would be very happy to give money to a cause where they feel that it's going to benefit people who are needy, and they are very generous people, I think, Australians. But what I'm discerning here is that the Palestinian Authority would qualify under our criminal code as an organisation which fosters or encourages terrorism. Now, this is an arguable thing. You would need to found it in evidence and facts about it. So what you do is look at that organisation and say, well, what does it actually do? Because Australians would not feel comfortable with their money going to foster, encourage or promote terrorism. Absolutely not. The moment the average Australian knew that, they would say, well, I'm not going to fund terrorism. Every human has the right to be alive and not be harmed, and you know, their hard-earned is not going to support terrorism in any way, shape or form.
Sophie, should you be successful in being elected to the Senate, you can guarantee that we will come knocking on your door with that issue.
Well, I welcome it because to my mind, we should all be unafraid of the truth. We should actually burrow down and find out what is truly happening. And we should not deceive the Australian people either. They should actually know where their money is going. And I'm conscious of this pay for slay scheme. And I think that if Australians knew that any of their hard-earned taxpayer dollars were going into a scheme which was making martyrs of terrorists, they would be horrified, and they would say, you're not to do that with our money. And in fact, there's no Australian department that's above the Australian law. So DFAT, for example, should comply with the criminal code. Our criminal code prohibits money going to any terrorist organisation that fosters, encourages, promotes, you name it, any form of terrorism. So DFAT can't funnel money into an outfit that does that. It's very clear to me.
Okay. I just want to touch briefly on a couple of other issues that have variably arisen in political discussion. What's the Australian Conservatives' view of immigration policy? That's one of the things being debated around the country.
Oh, is it? Yeah, it certainly is. Everywhere I go, it comes up as a topic of discussion. People are concerned. We have a very high immigration rate. I mean, we're a population of around 25 million, and yet we're getting close to 200,000 newcomers every year. This is a very high rate, and people are concerned about it because they realise that infrastructure can't keep up. Infrastructure takes time to plan and build and be funded, but also social cohesion. But one of the things that, and crime as well, but people are concerned about whether we are at risk of losing our beautiful Australian culture, because it's a very unique culture and we're very laid back, happy, stable people, and we enjoy a wonderful standard of living here.
So what changes would you push for?
Well, we would halve the rate of immigration, right. Yes, and we would also be much more careful about vetting the backgrounds of people to see whether, when they come here, that they're going to be a good fit with Australia. This matters to us enormously. It's not something that we should, bury our heads in the sand about. We need to actually look at other countries, look at Europe, look at the UK, see what is happening there and learn from it.
By good fit, do you mean they have the characteristics that would allow them to integrate into Australian society?
Yes, they would respect our Judeo-Christian heritage, they'd abide by our rule of law. And by the way, I am the daughter of a migrant. I have enormous respect for the migrants that have come here and built our nation. It's actually one of the most successful nations in the world when it comes to accepting migrants, and we've built a wonderful country based on our migrant population. So it's not the issue of allowing migrants full stop. It's to say slow the flow, but also vet the backgrounds of who's coming here. Are they going to contribute? Are they going to respect our rule of law? Or are they going to usurp our law? Are they going to try and introduce Sharia law, for example, just by way of one example? But, we have our It works very well, what we have in Australia, and we want to preserve that.
Indeed. Now, I know that some of the values that you personally have pursued and the Australian Conservative stands for traditional family values, looking after children,
yes.
etc. What are a couple of your priorities there?
All policy. So our view is, if there's commonsensical policy that's emanating from the government of the day, we would support it. All policy that supports family, we would support. So that's going to be our starting position. And we believe in marriage as well, and so policies that support strong marriages, because we say that the family is the best, most supportive cell in the body of society. If you have strong families, you actually end up with a lesser need for welfare, and you have lower rates of mental illness, and you have stronger communities, and you have a happier nation. All the evidence supports that.
The education of children at the moment has been debated a lot.
Yes.
The political issues, the gender fluidity issues.
Yes. So what we've found as I've been travelling around the countryside, people have talked to me about children's education, and there seems to be three sort of areas of concern. And one is that the children are being taught a jaundiced history about our heritage.
Right,
so they're being taught that the British brought dispossession and disease and genocide and what have you, instead of that they brought the rule of law and parliament and classical music and literature and engineering and sanitation, and that they didn't allow slavery, and that people were equal before the law. So they're not taught that proper history, they're taught a very warped version. So then of course they think that their history is shameful, and they're willing to embrace any new narrative about our nation. Secondly, they are being hypersexualised. And if Labor gets in, they plan to unfold or unroll the Safe Schools program across the nation. Now, in New South Wales, we had that cancelled because it teaches children about gender fluidity and transgenderism and cross-dressing and all sorts of adult fringe sexual concepts to young children who actually should be free to just be kids and not have to get their heads around all these, new pronouns and two virginities and chest binding and what have you, and being ushered down this path of gender transitioning and puberty blockers and so forth. I mean, that's really inappropriate. It also makes kids very anxious about themselves. They start to doubt even the most basic thing about their own sex, whether they're male or female. The other thing that children are being made anxious about is the fact that they're being reefed out of school and sent to demonstrations about man-made global warming. So they're being told that they will fry unless the authorities shut down coal-fired power stations and so forth. And I mean, it's not only a falsehood, it actually generates a lot of stress and anxiety on part of the children. They need to be in school learning the 3 Rs. Instead, they are being turned into ideologues, political activists, and fed a completely false narrative. So these are matters of concern. We would like to see children's education return to proper education. We are slipping in the education stakes. We're now down to 39th in the world, and this is really inappropriate. We should actually get back to teaching them about reading and writing and arithmetic and proper history and science and maths.
So Australia should be higher than Uzbekistan, perhaps?
Well, we have all the potential for it. I mean, there's no question that we are a wealthy nation and we have good teachers out there, but for some reason we've allowed ideology to infect our curricula, and so children are now being taken out of school, and hats off to the children if they're being so terrified about their future. I mean, good on them for wanting to do something about that, but it's actually a form of brainwashing, and it's so inappropriate. It's not fair to them.
Well, Sophie, look, thank you very much. What we're hearing here from Australian Conservatives, and I've had the opportunity to meet Senator Cory Bernardi once, there is a suite of sound Conservative policies. What I'm going to do is, if you have a look below this video in the first and second comment, I'll put a link to the Australian Conservatives website where you can read additional information about the policies. And if you feel moved to support Sophie's campaign, there'll also be a link that allows you to make a financial contribution, a donation to the campaign. So Sophie, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And we wish you good luck in the upcoming federal election.
Thanks, David.
And hope that we can have you another discussion when you're
Yes,
Senator
look
Sophie
forward to
York.
it. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you
you.
to all your viewers.